My husband called me a bitch use, so I paid him back with a phone call. Have you ever overheard someone say something about you, something so cruel, so unexpected that it felt like the air had been punched right out of your lungs? It happened on a Tuesday evening. I was finishing a late client call when I accidentally stayed on the line during a Bluetooth glitch. That's when I heard my husband's voice, laughing, joking, and then the words, "She's just a bitch use. Looks good, makes money, and doesn't ask questions." He didn't know I was still there, but I was. I heard every word. And in that moment something inside me didn't break. Shifted. Quietly. Sharply. Because what he didn't realize was that I had already started building a life of my own. And with just one phone call, I would flip his carefully curated world on its head. Has anyone ever spoken about you behind your back and thought you'd never find out? What did you do? Share it with me in the comments. I read everyone because I know how much words can sting. But before the call, before the fallout, let me take you back to where it all started. The moment our picture-perfect life began to crack. Part 1. The illusion of love. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to blur the lines between who you are and who they wanted you to be? I did. My name is Claire, I'm 35, and I own a boutique that I built from the ground up. And for the longest time I thought I had it all because I married my high school sweetheart, Ethan. In the beginning, our love was the kind people envy. Weekend getaways, spontaneous dancing in the kitchen, building our first home together with paint-streaked jeans and plans whispered under the stars. Ethan could charm anyone. My parents adored him. My friends thought we were the perfect match, and for a while I did too. But the thing about illusions is they shimmer just enough to distract you from what's real. First, the changes were subtle. Little eye rolls when I got excited about a new business idea. Jokes that weren't quite jokes, like when he'd say, "You'd be lost without me," and laugh a little too hard. He started brushing off my opinions in front of friends, correcting me mid-sentence, calling it banter. I told myself not to overreact. I wanted to believe it was just a rough patch, the stress of growing older, of juggling careers and responsibilities. But somewhere along the way, Ethan stopped seeing me as a partner and started treating me more like a possession. He questioned what I wore, monitored how long I stayed at work, even asked why I needed so many meetings with other men. I found myself shrinking to fit into a version of love that was no longer mine. I remember one night in particular we were in the kitchen, arguing about a business trip I needed to take to meet a potential investor. It was important. He didn't want me to go. Said I should be prioritizing us, even though I'd spent weeks preparing. I turned away from him to finish washing dishes, biting back tears. That's when I heard it. He muttered it low, just under his breath. "You're just a pretty tool. That's all you've ever been." Froze. My heart didn't shatter, it cracked quietly, in the kind of way only the truth can. But I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or throw a dish across the room like they do in the movies. I just kept washing, silent, because part of me wasn't ready to face what that moment really meant. I still wanted the dream I'd built in my head. I still wanted to believe he loved me. Have you ever ignored a red flag because you were afraid of what it might really mean? Maybe you brushed it off, made excuses, told yourself they were just stressed or tired. I've been there. And if you've been there too, please share your experience in the comments. You never know who your words might help feel less alone. But the truth has a way of finding its voice. And for me, that voice came through a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. A call that would shatter every illusion I clung to, and set something fierce and unstoppable in motion. Part 2. Call. You know how some moments don't just sting, they split your entire world in half. That moment came for me on a Thursday night. I was working late, finishing up a proposal with a glass of tea beside me and my phone charging nearby. I hadn't meant to listen in. Honestly, I thought the call had already ended. But it hadn't. Ethan's voice came through the speaker, careless, loud, and laughing. He was on the line with a friend. I could hear clinking glasses, bar noise, that kind of hollow background that lets you know someone is feeling just a little too full of themselves. And then he said it. "She's just a bitch use. Looks good in photos. Knows how to host a dinner. That's all." That's all. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just let the words settle in my bones like ice. My husband, the man who once danced with me barefoot in our empty living room, had just reduced me to a prop tool, a mask he wore in front of the world. He didn't know I heard it. And honestly, I think that's the only reason I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or demand answers. I just listened. Fully. Completely. Then I hung up. And I sat there, in the soft hum of our perfect little kitchen, with my heart pounding in my ears. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I started planning. You see, something clicked inside me. Not out of revenge, but out of reclaiming. I realized how far I'd shrunk to make this relationship work. How many times I bit my tongue, smoothed things over, told myself it was just a phase. That night, I opened a new file on my laptop labeled Claire's Freedom. I began organizing our finances. I checked accounts, logged passwords, scanned documents. I didn't even know how much of our life was in my name, but I was about to find out. And what I found was powerful. Turns out, Ethan never liked paperwork. Everything, our home, the cars, even his business website, was under my management. He'd always said, "It's easier that way." And now that little convenience was about to become my leverage. But even more than the documents, I started investing in myself. Quietly. I found a therapist, not for us, but for me. I needed to find my voice again. Not the soft one I used to keep the peace. The real one. The strong one. The voice I hadn't used in years. And slowly, week by week, I felt myself rebuilding. Not a plan for war, but a blueprint for peace. For power. For finally choosing myself. What would you have done in that moment? If you heard someone you trusted reduce you to nothing behind your back, would you have exploded? Packed a bag? Or sat silently like I did and waited? Tell me below. I truly want to know how you would have handled it. Because I know I'm not alone in this. And when the time was right, when I was ready, I made one phone call. Just one. And with it, I handed him the consequences he never imagined. The call he never saw coming. Part 3. My turn to speak. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that when you finally stand up, the shock on their face becomes your quiet revenge? That was me. After hearing Ethan laugh and call me a bitch to his friend on a call, he didn't know I was listening to. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or cry. I simply started planning. Because while he was mocking me behind my back, he had no idea I had already built a quiet exit strategy behind his. You see, what Ethan forgot, what he never cared to ask, was that my family wasn't just sentimental. It was smart. My grandfather had set up a family trust that quietly invested in multiple companies, including Ethan's. And guess who inherited silent investor status through that trust? Me. So I made a call not to him but to the board of directors at his company. They were surprised to hear from me. This quiet wife they had only met at cocktail parties and holiday events. But I had every document ready. Every report. Every flagged expense. Every personal dinner disguised as business. Every luxury item funneled through company cards. And I didn't just talk numbers, I shared the story behind those numbers. I described how Ethan controlled every detail of our home life while pretending to be a golden boy in the public eye. I told them about the emotional manipulation, the cold silences, and yes, even the phone call where he mocked me like a joke he'd already told too many times. And I made one thing very clear. I wasn't trying to ruin him. I was holding him accountable. They were quiet when I finished. Then they thanked me for coming forward. And within a few days, the consequences followed him like a shadow. But that wasn't the only consequence. While Ethan was still recovering from the board meeting, I had one more surprise. A courier showed up at his office that afternoon with a neat little envelope. Inside, divorce papers. Meticulously prepared. Legally airtight. Fair but firm. Thanks to his carelessness over the years, almost everything was in my name. The house. Cars. The joint business account he thought I never checked. I didn't need to take anything from him because he had already handed it all to me. Still, I didn't shout. I didn't humiliate him. That's not who I am. But I did make one call. He picked up, breathless, panicked. probably wondering if I was calling to beg, to explain, to fall apart. Instead, I said calmly, "This call is being returned." And then silence. Hung up. That moment wasn't loud. But it was powerful. Not because I wanted him to hurt, but because I finally chose me. My dignity. My voice. My worth. I didn't do it out of vengeance. I did it for the version of me that stayed silent for too long. For the woman who thought love meant shrinking to fit into someone else's shadow. Not anymore. Have you ever reclaimed your voice in a moment when someone least expected it? Have you ever stood up, not with anger but with power? Tell me in the comments. I want this to be a space where quiet strength is celebrated. Where your story matters just as much as mine. And just when I thought the story had ended, something happened that even I didn't see coming. Not everything was finished yet. Not for him and definitely not for me. Part 4. After the storm. They say healing comes in waves. I used to think that was poetic nonsense. But then came the quiet. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket on a cold morning. That was the kind of quiet I found after Ethan was gone. The divorce was final. The papers were signed. My name stood alone, not beside his anymore. There were no more whispered insults disguised as sarcasm. No more walking into rooms filled with tension so thick you could choke on it. Instead, I had a one-bedroom apartment with creaky floors and a window that let in the morning sun. I filled it with plants. Things that were mine, not chosen to impress someone else. And most importantly, I filled it with peace. Every morning I'd make my coffee, not rushed, not criticized. I'd sip it slowly, watching people walk their dogs outside. And for the first time in years I felt safe. But the real transformation wasn't in the apartment. It was in me. I started going to therapy not to fix what was broken between Ethan and me, but to understand why I had silenced myself for so long. Why I let someone chip away at my confidence piece by piece until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Week by week, I peeled back layers of guilt, fear, and shame. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. At first, my words were shaky, unsure. But soon, they poured out like truth finally given space to breathe. And then, one evening, I did something unexpected. I started a support circle online. Just a small group for women who had gone through toxic relationships and were trying to rebuild. I called it the Quiet Reclaim. Within days, women started joining. From all over. Some had just walked away. Some were still stuck, looking for signs that they weren't crazy. Others, like me, were learning to stand tall again. We shared stories, encouragement, laughter even, and tears, so many tears. It was in that space that I learned healing doesn't have to be loud or perfect. Just has to be honest. And then, months later, came the message. Ethan. He emailed first. Said he'd been thinking. That he didn't realize how much he missed me until I was gone. That he had made mistakes and hoped we could talk. I stared at the message for a long time. And then I deleted it. No rage. No revenge. Just closure. Because sometimes healing means knowing when a door should stay shut no matter how gently someone knocks. He tried calling next. I blocked the number. Again, not out of hatred but out of self-respect. Because by then, I had learned something I wish I'd known all along. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And when you finally remember who you are, don't let anyone rewrite that truth. Have you ever reached a place in your life where what used to hurt you no longer holds power over you? If so, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Your strength matters. And your voice deserves to be heard. And if you're still on your journey, know this. Healing isn't linear, but it is possible. And you are never alone. Because in the end, it wasn't the phone call that defined me. It was the silence that followed, the kind where I finally heard myself. And I liked what I heard. I didn't make that call to get even. I made it to find myself again. Because sometimes, strength doesn't roar, it whispers, "I'm done." If anyone has ever tried to define your worth with cruel words or careless actions, let this be your reminder. You are not what they called you. You are who you decide to become. If this story touched something in you, please like this video and subscribe to My Family Tragedy. We share stories that heal, stories that empower, and maybe, Just maybe, the next one we tell will be yours. Until then, stay strong. Dayu.